As far as I was concerned, bringing the gospel to my people amounted to a matter of life and death. One of us was right, and one of us was wrong. If Yeshua is not the Jewish Messiah and the only Savior of the nations, and if he's not the promised Redeemer whom the Father has sent to restore the preserved ones of Israel and to be a light of the nations, Isaiah chapter 49, verse 6, then bringing his message to the Jewish people is possibly the gravest threat to our physical and spiritual well-being. Why? Because if Jesus is not who he claimed to be, then urging Jews to believe in him is an invitation to apostasy and an attack on our very existence. If Jesus is an impostor, then belief in him threatens our survival as a distinct people chosen by God. But what if he is the prophet like Moses, whom God promised to raise up? And what if he is the one whom God commanded the Jewish people to heed? And what if we Jews will be held accountable by God if we fail to listen to what he said, just as Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 18 and 19 warn? Then, to withhold the message of the gospel from the Jewish people, specifically because we're Jews, is not an act of love. It's probably the most anti-Jewish act that a Christian can commit. This is not an easy matter to consider, but we can't push it aside. Either he's a blessing for Jews or he's a blight. There's really no middle ground, just as there was no middle ground between Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. Also, if Jesus is not the Messiah of Israel, then he's not the Christ of the nations. That means that Christians who worship him are guilty of idolatry, and they'll be judged by the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob for worshiping a man who claimed to be God. John chapter 10, verse 33. Ultimately, it comes down to this. Either Jesus is Lord of all, or Jesus is not Lord at all. Either he must be worshipped, adored, and obeyed by Jews and non-Jews alike, or he must be rejected by all as a false savior. Either everyone must hear the message, or no one needs to know his name. If you're not yet a believer in Jesus, you'll quickly discover that this book deals candidly with a passionate dispute between people who already acknowledge Yeshua as the promised Messiah. But there's a foundational question that needs to be asked and answered first. Is Jesus the Messiah or not? Or, as a Jewish man called John the Immerser, the baptizer, asked nearly 2,000 years ago, are you the expected one? Or shall we look for someone else? Matthew chapter 11, verse 3. I hope you'll read this book with that fundamental question in mind.